London. A cold drizzle glistened on the cobblestones outside Buckingham Palace. The air was thick with ceremony, red uniforms, gold buttons, rifles held high. Then, a black limousine rolled past the gates. The crowd gasped. Out stepped Donald Trump, shoulders squared, gaze firm, and in a voice that cut through the drizzle, he declared, "Step aside, I'm the president." The royal guard didn't flinch. The silence that followed could be felt in every heartbeat. What happened next wasn't just about politics or protocol. It was about pride, dignity, and the line between power and respect. And when the guard finally responded, the world would remember it as one of the most unexpected royal moments in modern history. If you love stories where history meets heart, where moments of pride turn into lessons of respect, then you're in the right place. Before we dive into this unbelievable royal encounter, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves powerful emotional moments. Because this isn't just about Trump or royalty, it's about what it truly means to earn respect. It began like any other royal morning in London, quiet, measured, and precise. The palace courtyard gleamed after an early drizzle, the kind that left the city smelling faintly of iron and roses. Tourists gathered beyond the gates, cameras raised, waiting for that glimpse of red coats and polished helmets. Then the rhythm broke. A deep hum rolled through the street, engines black and sleek slicing through the fog. It wasn't a royal procession. It was American. A convoy of armored vehicles, led by a flag that fluttered not with the Union Jack, but with stars and stripes. The onlookers murmured. Some laughed softly, others gasped. "Is that?" someone whispered, and yes. Stepping out of the limousine, coat buttoned, hair unmoved by the drizzle, was Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. He didn't hesitate. He looked up at the palace like a man staring at destiny. Cameras clicked furiously. The crowd's excitement turned to disbelief as he began walking toward the gates, his Secret Service detail tense but composed. Standing guard before him, unblinking, unyielding, were the Queen's guards. Scarlet tunics, bearskin hats, rifles held like extensions of their souls. They didn't move an inch. Not even their eyes flickered. Trump's footsteps echoed. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound was swallowed by the rain and magnified by the moment. He stopped just inches from the nearest guard, lifted his chin slightly, and said in that familiar commanding tone, the one that once echoed through rally halls and press briefings across America, "Step aside. I'm the president." The guard didn't respond. Not with words, not with a blink. The silence was so pure, it almost felt rehearsed. A single droplet of rain ran down the guard's cheek, or maybe it was sweat. But he didn't move. Trump's expression tightened. Not in anger, but in something more complex. Curiosity. Because here he was, the leader of one of the most powerful nations on earth, standing before men who didn't care about his title, his wealth, or his fame. Men who answered to a tradition older than any election, older than the very concept of America itself. And in that stillness, something remarkable began to unfold.
The tourists sensed it too. The murmurs faded. Even the guard's commanding officer, standing just out of view, watched with the measured patience of someone who had seen history repeat itself, but never quite like this. Trump took a breath. His voice softened slightly, not out of weakness, but a touch of human wonder. "I'm here to pay my respects," he said quietly. Still, no movement. The guards remained like statues, bound by centuries of royal protocol that even presidents couldn't break. But if you looked closely, behind the stoic stillness, something else was visible: respect. Not for power, but for presence. For someone bold enough to test the line between authority and tradition. Because the royal guard, contrary to what many believe, are not emotionless machines. They are soldiers, trained in silence, guardians of dignity itself. And in that moment, between Trump's command and their quiet defiance, there was no hostility. Only an unspoken dialogue between two forms of pride, one American, one British. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint echo of Big Ben's bells. The sound rolled across the wet stone, wrapping the scene in something cinematic, something that felt bigger than news or politics. Trump adjusted his coat. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. Maybe he admired their discipline. Maybe he understood that, for once, power didn't mean control. A reporter whispered into a microphone nearby, "The Royal Guard hasn't moved." The President's command went unanswered. But they were wrong. It had been answered, just not in the language most people recognized. The silence was the answer. It said, "Respect is earned, not ordered." And though the world watching might have missed it, Trump didn't. His eyes lingered on the nearest guard, and for a heartbeat, he nodded, barely noticeable. But there, a nod not of dominance, but acknowledgement. Then, a royal aide approached quietly, bowing slightly before Trump and gesturing toward a side entrance. The official visit would proceed, but the tone had changed. The air was different, charged, meaningful, respectful. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every flicker of expression. What looked like defiance from the guards had actually been something purer, a living symbol of boundaries that even presidents must respect. And as the limousine doors closed behind Trump again, one photographer caught it. The briefest exchange of glances between the president and the guard. Two men from different worlds, bound by pride and duty, both unyielding in their own way. Later, when that photo hit the headlines, the caption didn't need words. The image spoke for itself. Power meeting tradition, and both walking away unchanged, yet somehow more human. The city resumed its rhythm. The guards returned to their stillness. But those who had witnessed it whispered for days about the tension, the respect, and that single line, "Step aside. I'm the president." Because it wasn't just an order, it was a test. And the answer, wrapped in British silence, became one of the most talked about royal encounters of the decade. The sound of rain softened, replaced by the hush of awe. Cameras still pointed toward the palace gate, their lenses trembling in the chill breeze. For a moment, time itself seemed to hesitate, caught between two men, two nations, and one unforgettable command. "Step aside. I'm the president." Those words had cut through the London air like a blade through silk. Bold, confident, American to its very core. And yet, nothing moved. The guards stood frozen in their disciplined posture, eyes forward, rifles steady. The drizzle traced silver lines down their polished helmets. To them, this wasn't confrontation. It was duty. They weren't defying Trump. They were protecting something sacred, the image of the crown itself. One guard, young yet battle-hardened, could feel his pulse racing beneath the tight collar of his tunic. His name was James Harland, though no one watching would ever know it. Behind his stoic face, thoughts flickered like quiet sparks. He's the President of the United States, but the rules are the rules. He inhaled slowly. Every instinct screamed to stay still. And he did, because that's what the Royal Guard stands for, unwavering presence. They do not react. They endure. Trump's gaze lingered on James, as though he sensed a soldier's quiet storm beneath the surface. For a heartbeat, the world's most outspoken man met the world's most silent. The cameras zoomed in. Reporters whispered. And the moment became history, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Trump, realizing the guards would not move, took a slow step closer. It wasn't aggression. It was curiosity. A test? Maybe. A study in human resolve. He leaned slightly forward, his voice lower now, carrying less command and more wonder. "You know, in America, people listen when I give an order." Still, no reply, not even a glance. But if one listened closely, the silence spoke volumes. It said, "We listen, Mr. President, but not to voices of power. We listen to duty." Behind Trump, his Secret Service agents shifted subtly. They'd seen this before, leaders testing boundaries, traditions clashing with confidence. But even they looked impressed. The guard's stillness was unnerving, even majestic. Then, the unexpected happened. A gust of wind caught the edge of Trump's coat, flaring it like a flag. The nearest guard's hand twitched, just slightly, as he adjusted his grip on the rifle. It was nothing, just instinct. But to Trump it was enough. He smiled faintly, as if he'd found life within the marble. He chuckled under his breath. "Tough guys," he murmured. "I like that." Somewhere in the crowd, a British woman whispered to her son, "They don't move for anyone, love. Not even the Queen unless it's by command." Her words carried on the damp air, reaching the cameras, the microphones, and perhaps even the president himself. Trump straightened. He wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He was intrigued, because for all his life, he'd met men who bowed, who bargained, who bluffed. But hey, standing before these unflinching guards, he was meeting something rare, absolute loyalty to something beyond oneself. And in that realization, something inside him shifted. The guard's silence wasn't disrespect. It was honor, a code. Trump turned slightly, looking back at the palace gates, at the centuries of monarchy, at the ghosts of kings and queens who'd stood where he now stood. For once, he seemed to absorb the weight of history pressing down around him. And then, quietly, he said to no one in particular, "These men, they don't protect power. They protect meaning." It wasn't meant for the cameras. It wasn't political. It was human. The reporters caught it anyway. And the world would soon debate whether that single line revealed something deeper, respect hidden beneath pride. Just then, the gates opened with a slow, mechanical groan. A palace aide in a charcoal suit stepped forward, bowing politely. His expression was calm but firm. "Mr. President, if you'll follow me, please." Trump gave one last glance to the motionless guards. He didn't smile this time. He simply nodded. A silent gesture, one leader to another kind of strength. As he walked through the gates, one of the guards, James, felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest. It wasn't victory. It was validation. He had done his duty, but in doing so, he'd also witnessed something rare, understanding. The American president had tested him, yes, but in the end, he had also seen him. Later, when James returned to the barracks, the moment replayed in his mind. He wrote in his journal, a habit the guardsman rarely admitted to. He looked at me like he saw the man behind the uniform. And that was the truth of it. What millions saw as defiance was, in fact, a silent handshake between two forms of pride, one wrapped in gold braid, the other in red, white, and blue. It wasn't about who had more power. It was about who understood respect the best. The footage of that brief exchange went viral within hours. Social media split in two, some mocking, some admiring, most simply stunned by the calm dignity of it all. But the ones who truly understood the depth of that moment weren't the politicians or the pundits. They were the soldiers and the people who knew what it meant to hold the line when the world was watching. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is a raw discipline. And as the rain returned to London, washing the courtyard clean, one truth lingered quietly beneath the surface. No command, no title, no rank can shake a man who stands guard for something greater than himself. The palace courtyard had gone strangely quiet. Even the London rain seemed to hold its breath. The moment had passed, the command had been given, the silence had fallen, and yet something lingered in the air, heavy and electric. No one expected what would happen next. The guards still stood motionless, but there was a shift. A subtle, almost imperceptible motion rippled through their perfect stillness. Not rebellion, not reaction, but recognition. The kind that only those trained to feel silence would ever notice. James Harland, the same guard who had stood eye to eye with the president, felt a thought rise from deep within his chest. He could not speak. He could not move. But his heart, it spoke for him. "You may command a nation, sir, but I serve a legacy." And just then, the palace's brass band, stationed far beyond the courtyard, began to play. Slowly, deliberately, the unmistakable sound of "God Save the King." The tune drifted through the fog, ancient, proud, and hauntingly beautiful. Each note cut through the air like a reminder that this ground, these walls, this uniform, they belonged to something that had endured centuries of kings, wars, and revolutions. Trump stopped walking. The aides froze. The crowd's chatter died. The president turned slowly, eyes tracing the line of red uniforms standing before him like an unbroken wall of time. For once, the man known for his voice said nothing. He simply listened. Because that was a moment when the royal guard responded, not in words, not in motion, but in tradition. The music was their answer. And in that sound, Trump seemed to understand. A journalist later described the scene perfectly. The gods didn't move for him, they moved history around him. It wasn't defiance. It was something purer. It was the unshakable truth that some things in this world are beyond command, like respect, like duty, like love for something greater than oneself. Trump's eyes softened as the anthem played. He removed his hat, a small but meaningful gesture. The crowd saw it too. Phones lifted higher, cameras zoomed in, and social media lit up instantly. Trump stands still during the royal anthem. A moment of silence, a moment of respect. And while pundits would later twist and debate the politics, those who were there, they felt something deeper. It wasn't about who yielded or who stood taller. It was about the invisible bridge of respect built between two traditions that rarely meet on equal ground. The American dream, bold and loud. The British crown, silent and timeless. As the anthem ended, the final notes fading into the drizzle, the gods resumed their stillness, the kind of stillness that feels almost holy. Trump took a slow step forward, then paused. He looked once more at the god, at James, and for a second, both men shared an unspoken thought. Different worlds. Same honor. Trump's voice, when it came again, wasn't the commanding tone that had started this moment. It was quiet, reflective. You stand proud, soldier, he said, and I respect that. There was no official response. But James, eyes fixed straight ahead, felt a tremor in his chest. Not of fear, not of strain, but pride. Because sometimes the greatest acknowledgement a soldier can receive isn't applause or medals. It's being seen, truly seen, by someone who understands what it means to serve something larger than themselves. The reporters caught every frame. The footage replayed across networks in slow motion, the salute of silence, the anthem, the nod. But what they didn't capture was the emotion threading quietly beneath it all. Behind the palace walls, as Trump was led inside for the scheduled diplomatic meeting, whispers traveled fast. Royal aides spoke softly of what had just unfolded, a spontaneous moment that no briefing, no protocol could have predicted. And in those whispers was admiration. Because for all his brashness, Trump had shown something unexpected, humility. And for all their rigidity, the gods had shown something even rarer, humanity through silence. Later that evening, as night fell over London, James walked the courtyard again. The rain had stopped, and the palace light shimmered against the wet stone. He paused where the president had stood and allowed himself a rare smile. No one had spoken, no orders exchanged. Yet somehow the world had heard their conversation. He thought of his grandfather, who had once guarded the same gates during the Queen's Jubilee. His words echoed in James's memory. Son, a real soldier doesn't fight to be seen. He stands so others may believe. And that, perhaps, was the truest thing about that day. No one had won. No one had yielded. But both sides had walked away richer, one reminded of humility, the other reaffirmed in tradition. Across the Atlantic, American headlines read, "Royal Guard refuses Trump's command." But in Britain, the story had a different tone. Two symbols of strength meet, neither blinked. And if you asked a few who truly understood what had happened in that courtyard, they'd tell you, it wasn't about power. It was about understanding the difference between being obeyed and being respected. The palace clock struck noon. The sky over London had cleared to a pale silver, and sunlight spilled across the cobblestones that had only hours earlier held one of the strangest, most unforgettable encounters in modern history. Inside Buckingham Palace, the meeting was quiet, not the kind of silence born of discomfort, but the silence of reflection. The kind that follows when something profound has been felt, though no one quite knows how to put it into words. President Trump sat across from the royal delegation. Gold accents shimmered against the cream walls. A teapot steamed softly between them, the air smelling faintly of Earl Grey and Polish. He didn't talk much. Not at first. For a man who had built a career on his voice, on boldness, on sound bites, on volume, there was something different in his eyes now. Perhaps he was still hearing the anthem. Perhaps he was replaying the moment when the god hadn't moved, and yet had said everything without a word. A royal aide cleared his throat gently. "Mr. President, His Majesty appreciates your visit." Trump nodded slowly. "And I appreciate his men." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. That single line carried the weight of the morning, the confrontation, the quiet defiance, the lesson. When he rose to leave, he paused at the doorway, glancing out toward the courtyard once more. From that angle, he could just see the line of guards, unshaken, unbroken. He smiled, a small, almost private smile. "You don't have to shout," he murmured, "to make history." Outside, as his convoy prepared to depart, something remarkable happened, something unplanned. The royal guard shifted formation. The sound of boots against stone echoed sharply, precise and synchronized. Every eye turned. The crowd hushed. And then one guard stepped forward, not breaking formation, not violating protocol, but performing a single, measured gesture, a salute, not to the man, but to the respect he'd finally shown. Trump froze for a moment, taken off guard. He looked at the young soldier, the same one whose eyes had met his that morning. And slowly, he returned the gesture, hand to chest, head slightly bowed. A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. Some cheered softly, others simply watched in awe. It was as though centuries of history had exhaled together, finally at peace. Two men, two worlds, and one silent understanding. Because in that small exchange, something profound was revealed. Power demands attention, but respect invites it. As the convoy rolled away, sunlight glinted off the palace gates, the same gates that had refused to open to command, yet opened freely to humility. That night, news networks across the globe replayed the footage, the command, the silence, the salute. Commentators called it everything from an awkward standoff to a defining diplomatic moment. But to those who watched with open hearts, it was something far simpler and far more beautiful. It was a reminder that dignity needs no volume. Back in the barracks, James Harlan sat quietly on his bunk. His uniform hung neatly on the stand beside him, damp from the rain. A fellow guard asked, "Did you see his eyes at the end?" James nodded, staring into the middle distance. He understood. He didn't mean politics. He didn't mean protocol. He meant the code, that ancient, invisible promise between men who stand for something beyond themselves. Later, as he wrote in his journal, something he'd done every night since joining the Guard, his pen moved slowly across the page. Respect isn't taken by command. It's offered in silence. He closed the book, exhaled softly, and smiled. He knew that what had happened that morning would outlive every headline, every tweet, every loud opinion. Because moments like that, quiet, powerful, human, never really fade. Across the ocean, in the stillness of Air Force One, Trump looked out the window at the night sky. His aide asked, "Everything all right, sir?" Trump didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was uncharacteristically gentle. "They didn't move," he said, "but maybe they didn't have to." He leaned back in his seat, eyes drifting toward the clouds below. Somewhere deep down, beyond politics, beyond pride, beyond persona, something in him shifted. Maybe it was understanding. Maybe it was respect. Maybe, just maybe, it was growth. Because even the loudest voices learn, one day, that silence can speak louder. And as a jet cut through the dark sky, the last image lingering in his mind wasn't the gold of the throne room or the flash of cameras. It was a young man in a red coat, standing still in the rain, unyielding, unafraid, and quietly teaching the world that true strength doesn't shout. It simply stands. And that, right there, is the beauty of this story. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about the royal family or American power. It was about respect. The kind that can't be demanded, only owned. In that courtyard, two men from two worlds met without words, without agreement, and yet they understood each other perfectly. It's a reminder for all of us. You don't have to raise your voice to prove your worth. You don't have to move mountains to show your strength. Sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is stay still. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that humility is power and respect is timeless, then share it. Like this video, subscribe for more real human stories, and tell us in the comments, what does respect mean to you? Because at the end of the day, history doesn't just remember what we say. It remembers how we stand.